Everything is white today, including my jumper, my mug, my cushions, because today we're talking about winter books. It is officially December, and so it is definitely time to talk about wintry reads. For a change, I am not going to be talking about classic books today. I thought rather than recycle the same titles that you may be seeing everywhere else, I wanted to focus on contemporary fiction novels that maybe you're not talked about as much, but that are definitely on my radar to read. And so I have for you 4 titles of books that are set in the winter. Either majority of the action is set in the winter, or at least a huge part of them is set in the winter, that I have not talked about on this channel at all yet. And then I also want to give you 4 titles of the books that I have read, because I realize that some of you prefer to trust recommendations of books that your booktuber has actually read. So the last 4 titles will be the books that I have read. They set in winter, and I can 100% guarantee you that they are excellent reads. So let's dive in. First one, we've got a book by Mary Lawson, who is a Canadian writer, and the title of this particular book is Road Ends. I haven't read anything by her, but I think she's fairly well known actually. I'm sure she's received some literary awards in the past. And you just need to look at the cover of this book to be reassured that this book is set in winter. I mean, look at this. You've got piles of snow on the roofs of the houses. Anyway, so this is set in a remote northern Canadian town. And the description of this book matches perfectly what I love in books, because this is about a family that has problems, that is stuck, that is struggling. So you've got a father who retreats into silence because of grief. You've got a daughter who just wants to escape, and the youngest son is struggling with mental instability. This is very much an introspective novel told from multiple perspectives, and that emotional struggle of that family is supposed to be emphasized by the geographical struggles. So that challenge and silence of a place that is remote and snowbound. And because of it, I think this is a perfect wintry read. I can't wait to get stuck into that. I don't have a copy of the next book because I'm planning to read it on my e-reader, and I have already downloaded it, and actually I'm into maybe first 20 pages. And that book is A Spell of Winter by Helen Dunmore. So this novel is set on this very much crumbling. Some of you may be familiar with that title because that title was the book that won the very first Women's Prize for Fiction in 1996, I believe, which at that point would have been called something else. It was called Orange Prize for Fiction. Estate, somewhere in England, I think north of England, around WW1. And the 2 main characters are 2 siblings, and they very much isolated. I know I've just started reading it, but I can already tell that this book is full of this very much gothic, wintry feel to it, because you have frozen orchards and abandoned rooms and freezing temperatures. I mean, there was a whole paragraph dedicated to how Kathy, one of the 2 main characters, was skilled at lighting fire and the process around it. Lighting fire in her bedroom, by the way. So she would have had to set everything up in the evening when she was going to bed so that everything was ready, because the first thing you have to do in the morning is to get that fire going. Otherwise, it's going to be excruciatingly cold in the house. There is already a sense of tension and sense of decay, probably not just of the house, but maybe also as a way of a metaphor for other things. I don't know. I don't want to know anymore. If you know me, I don't like to give away too much plot because I like to find out about it myself, but I can guarantee this is a perfect wintry read. This next book, I had to restrain myself from reaching for it because I really wanted to read it during the wintry month. But this came so highly recommended by Angela's Bookcase, one of the booktubers I really, really like, and she completely sold it to me. This sounds absolutely fascinating. This is Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. Hannah Kent is an Australian writer, but she learned about the story of this woman in Iceland who in 1829 was sentenced to death for the killing of two men. And so this is that woman's story. And we're learning about this story because the woman goes to live, before her execution, she goes to live with this family who are based in a very, very rural Iceland. And so initially that family fears Agnes because this is the name of the presumably a murderer, but as they spend time with her, the perspectives shift, and so you have this truth that is being slowly uncovered, and at the same time you have exploration of how is it that society decides who is worth mercy. I'm not sure if I'm selling it right, but I will link Angela's Bookcase relevant video below. Please go and watch it because she talks about this book with such enthusiasm. I know for sure I'm going to enjoy this, and because it's set in rural Iceland during a very brutal winter, I can't think of a better book to read than this one during the wintry months. And for the final fourth book, originally I had on my list The Land in Winter by Andrew Miller, which I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic read. But because I talked about that book in one of my recent videos, and also because that book is very well known by now, it was shortlisted for Booker's Prize, I wanted to mention a book that is not talked about as much yet. Now, this next author is actually a very well-known and very well-established author because it is Colm Tóibín. I have his book Long Island, which is sitting on my shelf waiting to be read. However, for the wintry months, I have seen in the bookstore recently that a new novella has been published by him called A Long Winter. When I was doing research about this book, even though it has just been published as a standalone book, I understand that that novella is also part of his collection of short stories titled Mothers and Sons. So if you prefer, you can get it in that form as well. But obviously the edition of A Long Winter on its own is gorgeous in itself as well. I think this may be a good book, or it sounds like it could be a good book for the fans of Claire Keegan, because it seems like a very similar size to what Claire Keegan tends to prefer. And again, this is set in the middle of winter, somewhere high up in the mountains, and you've got this family where basically one day husband and wife have an argument and the wife just walks out. And so the husband is left with his son, both very much resenting each other, and now they need to navigate their relationship, but also, navigate the harsh conditions of the winter and of the weather. There is a third character in there apparently, but again, I don't want to be talking about it because it's a short novella. I don't want to be spoiling the plot or giving you the full plot. Go grab it because this is another book that screams winter reading to me, and I'll definitely be reading it. If not in December, then maybe in January. My TBR for the end of this year seems to be already overflowing. And now for the 4 books that I have actually read that, in my opinion, are perfect for winter reading are Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. I talked about this book just recently in my October? Yes, I think it was October reading wrap-up. One of the best contemporary fiction novels I have read for a very, very long time. I link my monthly wrap-up below where I talk about this book in case you want to be convinced a bit more to read this book. It is very hard to talk about this book without spoilers. So it may be one of those books that you just need to trust me that if you've been on this channel for a bit and you know what kind of books I enjoy and you enjoy similar books, I promise you, you can just go into it blind. But yes, set in the Polish mountains during, again, very, very harsh weather and set in this very much isolated, not even a village, because there are just a handful of houses. Do you know what? Now I'm talking about this book, I almost feel like rereading it again when it gets really, really cold. Highly, highly recommend. And then another book that is a fantastic book, and also some of it is set in the winter, is The Wolf Border by Sarah Hall. This I read back in January. Again, I will link the relevant video below. If you like the themes of redemption and if you like deeply flawed characters who are trying to rebuild their lives, this will be a fantastic read for you. I adore Sarah Hall's writing. I'm going to be reading all of her books. I know right now the book that is written by her that seems to be everywhere, it's called Helm, which looks also really interesting. So you've got this scientist who specializes basically in wolves, and she relocates herself from the US. She moves to the north of England because she is hired by this extremely rich aristocrat to introduce wild wolves into his estate. It does sound super intriguing, doesn't it? And it is. I promise you, it's a fascinating topic that is very well done in this book, but it's just a background to the story of the key character Rachel, who, like I said, is one of those characters who, after, you know, making a few mistakes in her life, isolating herself a little bit, she's in mid-40s, I believe, is trying to put her life together a bit. And don't get me wrong, this story here takes place over a certain period of time that also includes summertime as well, but the first part of the book is definitely set in the winter. And actually the whole story, because of the whole premise of rewilding wolves on this rural estate, has this sort of wintry feel to it. I love this book and I highly recommend this book. The only thing I'm gonna say is this is by Faber and Faber in terms of the publishing house, and surprisingly there are a few spelling mistakes in this book. I think it's just a case of an imperfect editing job. It did take me aback a little bit because you don't often come across spelling mistakes in books, but it certainly doesn't take away from the story. Okay, and the final two books, I don't have copies of those because one of them I read a library copy, and that was Olga by Bernard Schling. I sang praises of this book probably 2 or 3 times by now, so again I will link a review of that book below if you want more details. Bernard Schling, one of my top new favorite writers for sure. And Olga is definitely a perfect wintry read. Why? Because one of the characters in there is this charismatic aristocrat who is absolutely obsessed with polar expeditions. Also because the novel is set in 19th century Prussia, so obviously not the warmest of climates. And also because some of the parts of the book are written in form of letters, and so that gives you that feel of sitting by a window on a snow-heavy afternoon and contemplating life lived in longing. And I'm saying life lived in longing because the main character is this fierce, very intelligent woman who is determined to carve out her space in her current world. But her life ends up being marked by secrets, by long separations, by societal inequalities, gorgeously written in these bite-sized chapters, which I love. And as if this wasn't enough, as if, portraying a life of a woman with this quiet resilience wasn't enough to convince you to read this story. In the backdrop, you have all of the turbulence of 20th century Germany. I was absolutely blown away by this novel. Just like with Sarah Hall, I will be reading all of the books by Bernhard Schlink. And finally, I have to mention this book when talking about wintry reads, because this book is set in Philadelphia during the very cold months of November and December and January. I believe it starts not too long before Christmas. The book I'm talking about is Long Bright River by Liz Moore. This is a contemporary story about a female patrol officer, not a detective. She's your regular patrol officer, but you do get a bit of a detective story, again, as a bit of an anchor to the book as opposed to the main theme, because the story is really about family and trauma. The main character, the patrol officer, her name is Mikey, and this story is about her and her sister Casey. Casey is a drug addict who has disappeared. No one can find her, and actually most people are not interested in finding her except for Mikey. And please don't be fooled by the way I'm describing it as if it's just another police/detective story. This is actually a very, very deep commentary on some extremely difficult themes. And this is why I really appreciate Liz Moore's writing, because she doesn't shy away from diving deep into difficult themes, not just themes relating to addiction and trauma and difficult childhood, but also themes like, for example, sexism within the police force. This is one of the big reasons why I really appreciate Liz Moore's writing, and also I really appreciate it because her characters are very much flawed. They deeply flawed, and I love when a character is flawed, because aren't we all flawed? There's something very real about her writing, and on top of all that, you also get one or actually two twists in the story that you didn't see coming. Definitely thought-provoking, definitely one of those stories that will stay with you, but also a real page turner. That's it. These are the books I wanted to talk about today. If you are a seasonal reader, then I hope you found it helpful, and please do let me know in the comments what you're going to be reading this winter. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you as always next Friday. Bye for now.